Warning: the content we discuss can be intense and graphic, covering details that might not be suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to What the Crime, a podcast where we explore true crimes, cold cases, or the most mysterious stories that happen for real. I'm your host Alex, and today we dive into one of the most complex and infamous cases to date, the murder of Meredith Kercher. This case has been widely covered and discussed, and it has haunted the Italians for years. We are going to dedicate 3 episodes to this case. The Meredith Kercher case is so well known that it's impossible to discuss it without spoilers. We all know the story and its conclusion because it dominated the headlines for years. We've been bombarded with details from the crime scene, opinions from aging experts, and endless reconstructions. To be honest, when this case first came out, Italians were all tired of hearing about it. We followed it vaguely, picking up bits and pieces from the media. Collectively, we thought everyone involved was guilty. Sollecito, guilty. Amanda Knox, guilty. Why even ask? There are two main viewpoints: those who believe Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito are guilty, and those who have delved into the details of the investigation and trial. Here, on What the Crime, we are going to do something that hasn't been done before. We share material that's virtually unknown, here to recount what Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito experienced in Perugia. There's someone crucial to this story who is often overlooked. Who is this key figure? We're talking about Rudy Guede. Rudy Guede came from the Ivory Coast with his father at the age of 5. By 15, he was alone in Perugia, without parents or relatives. He was taken in by a wealthy local family because he showed a promise as a basketball player. Rudy didn't want to work and loved to spend his new family's money. He lied constantly. The head of the household said, "I thought I was helping him build a future, but I realized I was wrong to trust him. He was a pathological liar." Eventually, they kicked Rudy out, leaving him on the streets at 18. He moved to Lecco in 2005 to live with an aunt, and later to Milan, where he worked in a bar before being fired. In March 2007, he returned to Perugia and was hired as a gardener by the family that had once taken him in. 5 months later, he was fired again. By September 2007, Rudy was alone, without guidance or money. He still wanted to enjoy the nightlife and the influx of young students in Perugia, so he turned to crime. Starting September 27, 2007, Rudy Guede became the prime suspect in 6 burglaries between Milan and Perugia, culminating in the murder of Meredith Kercher 36 days later. Let's look at some of these burglaries to understand the lead up to the tragic event. On September 27, 2007, Rudy broke into the home of Christian Tramontano, a bouncer in Perugia. Christian heard Rudy downstairs, confronted him, and Rudy fled after stealing 3 credit cards and some cash. Tramontano decided not to report it to the police due to the hassle of dealing with bureaucracy. A week later, Tramontano saw Rudy in a nightclub, but did nothing. Imagine how different things might have been if Rudy had been arrested then. On October 8, 2007, the owner of a private nursery in Milan discovered that someone had broken in over the weekend. The kitchen was a mess, with pasta strewn everywhere. The culprit, Rudy Guede, who also stole €2,000 from a small safe. He also cooked a meal and slept there before fleeing. Fast forward to October 12, 2007. Rudy is back in Perugia, celebrating a friend's birthday. During the night, he encounters 2 of the 4 students living below Meredith's apartment. they play basketball together. The two invite Rudy up, and they end up partying with Amanda Knox and Meredith Kercher until 4 a.m. At one point, Rudy asks to use the bathroom, but doesn't return for a while. One of the guys finds him asleep on the toilet with his fishes floating below him. Apparently, Rudy had an habit of not flushing the toilet. Moving on to the weekend of October 13 and 14, 2007. Rudy climbs a 3-meter wall of a lawyer office in Perugia, breaks a window, and enters. Remember this detail of him breaking the window, it will come useful later on in our story. Rudy makes a mess in the lawyer's office, throwing documents everywhere, overturning desks and chairs, and, once again, using the toilet without flushing. After drinking orange juice from the fridge, he cranks up the heating to the maximum. By the time he leaves, a laptop, a mobile phone, a printer, and USB stick are missing. On October 23, 2007, Mara Manu Diaz, Rudy's neighbor, receives a call from the police informing her that her apartment is on fire. A thief had broken in, cooked food while leaving the stove on, and set fire to a scarf on a lamp. Tragically, her cat suffocated in the fire. On October 24, Meredith Kercher notices someone has defecated in her apartment's garden for the second time and mentions it to a downstairs neighbor. The following day, October 25, Amanda and Meredith attend a classic music concert together. During intermission, Meredith goes to the bathroom, and a young man takes her seat. Amanda thinks he resembles a character from her favorite book, Harry Potter. It turns out to be Raffaele Sollecito, at 23 years old, about to graduate in computer engineering. Raffaele, shy and inexperienced with women, notices Amanda and gathers the courage to introduce himself. They hit it off, and after the concert, Raffaele asks for her number. Amanda suggests he visit her at the bar where she works. Raffaele does, waiting for her shift to end, and they spend the night together. Their relationship begins exactly 1 week before Meredith's death. Sollecito later describes his relationship with Amanda as his second sexual experience, despite spending 14 months on an Erasmus exchange in Germany. For the media, he became the boy with the icy stare, seen as guilty, obsessed with sex, drugs, and thrills. In reality, he was a nerdy teenager passionate about manga and video games. Then, on October 26, 2007, Rudy Guede takes a train from Perugia to Milan. Once there, he revisits the same nursery from earlier that month. The next morning, the owner, her assistant, and a plumber find the nursery in chaos once again. Rudy had been there, causing more havoc. Here is one of the most surreal moments we hear in this story. Rudy, instead of fleeing or attacking, behaves as if he has every right to be there at that moment inside the nursery. The owner sees him and asks, "What are you doing here?" Rudy calmly responds, "I'm Rudy, a student." Rudy pretends to be a student, saying, "I'm Rudy Guede, a student from Perugia. I arrived yesterday and paid a guy at the central station 20 euros for a place to stay. He told me I could sleep in this nursery, and he was the one who let me in." The owner then calls the police. When the police arrive, they find in his backpack a large knife from the nursery kitchen, a computer, and a cell phone from a law firm in Perugia, and also a gold watch belonging to Mara Manu Diaz's mother, who was the neighbor whose house had burned down. And here is another absurd thing. The prosecutor in Milan doesn't consider stealing a kitchen knife a serious crime. However, he discovers that the computer and phone belong to the law firm that had been robbed. So he confiscates the laptop, phones, and the mysterious gold watch. They found everything that proves he had stolen something, carrying it all in his backpack. The prosecutor in Milan calls the police in Perugia to ask what to do, and they respond that, for them, Rudy Guede is clean and not to arrest him. So, incredibly, he is let go. He goes back to the station and takes a train to Perugia. Imagine what would have happened if they had decided to arrest him instead of letting him go. So many lives wouldn't have been ruined, and an incredible girl's life wouldn't have been lost. Now, let's get to the day of the murder, November 1st, 2007. It's 8 p.m., and Amanda and Raffaele decide to have a romantic evening. They decide to start watching a movie. At 8:18 p.m., Amanda receives a text message from her boss, Patrick Lumumba, the owner of the bar where she works. The message says, "Hi Amanda, today there won't be many customers. You don't need to come in tonight. See you on Tuesday." She replies in Italian, "Sure, see you later. Have a good evening." It is hard to explain, but "see you later" in Italian means that they will actually see each other later the same night. Obviously, Amanda, being American, translated "see you later" literally, giving the impression that the guys would have seen each other later that night. Seems an insignificant detail, but we will hear more later on in the story. Amanda turns off her phone at 8:34 p.m. to avoid getting another message from Lumumba, possibly asking her to go to work at the bar. Amanda tells Raffaele that she can stay at his place, so he also turns off his phone at 8:42 p.m. to avoid hearing from his father. They finish watching the movie, cook some fish, smoke a joint, and have sex. Meanwhile, Meredith, after celebrating Halloween, comes home at 5 a.m. and immediately goes to sleep. She wakes up much later and goes out with some friends at 4 p.m. But she's still tired, so at 8:30 p.m. decides to go home to sleep. Now we have the forensic reconstruction by Ron Henry of the murder based on physical evidence collected and analyzed by experts used during the court trial. At 7 p.m., Rudy Guede arrives at Via della Pergola, where Meredith and Amanda used to live, to observe the residence. A few days earlier, he had heard that the four guys living downstairs would be going on vacation and hoped that the girls would follow suit. Rudy doesn't find anyone either in the downstairs apartment or in the girls' apartment. He decides to wait a little longer to be sure. He returns at 8:30 p.m. and still doesn't find anyone. He decides to break in. He takes a large rock and uses it to smash the windows of the girl's apartment, then waits for any reaction for someone. Exactly the same modus operandi as with the law firm's break-in. But there's complete silence. The house is empty. Rudy climbs in. The first thing he does is check the front door and sees it's impossible to open from the inside. So he understands that to escape, he'll have to climb out the window again. But then Rudy feels thirsty and goes to the kitchen to drink almost an entire carton of juice. Then he sits down and relaxes, congratulating himself on successfully breaking in by climbing. About an hour later, Rudy feels a stomach ache and panicking rushes to the nearest bathroom, the one next to the kitchen. As he had done in the past, he takes his time on the toilet and, importantly, doesn't flush, leaving his signature. Then he hears a noise, Someone is opening the door, and he hears a female voice asking if anyone is home. Rudy quickly gets up and moves to the kitchen to see who has entered. Knowing it will be impossible to escape through the main entrance, he decides to rob the girl who just came in. Rudy pulls out a knife, pulls up the hood of his sweatshirt, and slowly moves towards Meredith's bedroom. She's lying down, about to call her mother to tell her everything is okay, but sees Rudy and he demands that she gets up. Rudy tries to stop her but fails until he corners her from behind, holding a knife to her throat. Meredith refuses to cooperate, struggling to escape. Rudy throws her onto the bed and pins her down. It's here that the knife pierces her on the right side of the throat, causing deep bleeding. The pillow is soaked in blood, and Rudy has cuts from the fall on his hand. Meredith can now only point unsteadily to her nightstand, where her mom's rent money, €300, is kept. Rudy then removes the knife from her throat and moves away, leaving a handprint on the pillow. To steady himself, he leans against the wall, leaving another blood stain. Rudy is furious with Meredith's resistance and wound because if caught, his sentence will be much longer. He makes Meredith get up from the bed, still searching for rent money. Eventually, he finds the €300 while the bleeding English 21 years old tries to escape. Rudy focuses on the money and Meredith sees an opportunity. She grabs a pillow and hurls it at the former basketball player, attempting to reach the bedroom door. Rudy, Rudy's hood falls, and Meredith immediately recognizes him. Rudy realizes that she has seen him. Rudy grabs her by the hair and strikes her in the face. Then he grabs her and slams her to the ground, hitting her in the face again. Finally, he stabs her in the throat once more, pulling up and then to the right, creating a nearly 8 centimeters hole. Meredith Kercher collapses against Rudy's leg. Rudy rushes towards the exit but realizes he has neither the keys nor the money. He returns to the bedroom and stands there watching the girl. With a twisted decision, he decides to wait there for her death, watching Meredith agonize. He is terrified she might recognize him. Meredith remains conscious but mortally wounded, unable to speak. As for Rudy, seeing her in this state, he thinks only of himself once again. He convinces himself he'll be caught and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. So he decided to have sex one last time with a woman. This is all documented by forensic engineer Ron Hendry. He is reconstructing the events based on the court's verdict. We are only reporting his words. Guede then places the knife on the bed and begins undressing Meredith, removing her jacket and t-shirt and tries to remove her bra but fails, so he breaks it. While all this happens, Rudy gets up multiple times to go to the bathroom for towels to clean up the excessive blood that was bothering him. He then takes a blanket and uses it to cover Meredith. At this point, the 21 years old is dead, and Rudy kneels down, but suddenly stops. He's had enough himself now. He focuses on the loot. He takes the €300, credit cards from her purse, and a couple of cell phones. Then he takes the keys and locks the room. This will buy more time before the blood. Rudy then heads to the entrance, uses Meredith's key, and closes the door behind him, or so he thinks, because the door remains open. It's 9:30 p.m. Rudy discards both cell phones, returns to his apartment to clean up, and goes dancing until dawn. This is an email sent by Amanda to her parents a couple of days after her roommate's death. describing what happened. I woke up at 10:30 at Raffaele's place and headed towards my apartment. My goal was to take a shower and change, but when I arrived, I immediately noticed something unusual. The door was wide open, which had a defect. If you didn't lock it just right, the wind would always open it. So we were all careful. So we were all careful to lock the door. Strange, okay, but I thought someone had gone out to take the. Strange, okay, but I thought someone had gone out to take out the trash. When I entered, I yelled to see if anyone was home. No one answered. My door was open and Meredith's was closed, so I thought she was still asleep. I undressed and took a shower. It was when I came out that I noticed blood in the bathroom, on the mat, and in the sink. At first, I thought it was from when I got my ears pierced a few days earlier. Strange, I thought. But then I thought Meredith might have had menstrual problems and hadn't had time to clean up the blood. Then I went to the other bathroom to get the hair dryer and noticed that someone had left feces in the toilet, something none of us would ever do. It was at that moment I felt something was wrong, so I went back to Raffaele to explain all the odd things I had noticed, and he suggested calling one of her roommates, Filomena. The phone records show Amanda called Meredith at 12:07 and Filomena at 12:09. And Filomena at 12:09. Amanda's emails continues. Raffaele and I head towards my house. The kitchen was okay, but then I opened Filomena's room, which was closed, and saw it completely overturned. Her window was open and broken, but the computer was still there on her desk. I convinced myself that thieves had broken in. I then knocked on Meredith's door with no answer. I started screaming and yelling, but nothing. I was in a panic. Raffaele decided to try to break down the door, but without success. So we decided to call the police. Raffaele called his sister, a policewoman, and then we called the police. But first, two postal police officers arrived because they were looking for Filomena, the owner of a cell phone found in the morning in a garden. Finally, the door was forced open and someone shouted, "Blood!" The two postal officers evacuated everyone from the house and notified the head of the homicide squad, Monica Napoleoni, who rushed to the crime scene. In Italy, there are two separate police forces. One is called Polizia, the second one is called Carabinieri. They basically do the same job. From now on, we will refer to the police as Carabinieri, being the police force in attendance to the scene. The case is now in the hands of the Carabinieri, and this will be the first setback for Amanda and Raffaele. Giuliano Mignini, the public prosecutor on duty that day, will soon become one of the leaders, the main leader of the investigation. Mignini is a fundamental character in this story, and it's important to spend a few words to understand it better. He is described as such by Mario Spezzi and Douglas Preston in their book The Monster of Florence, a true story. The magistrate was indicated by popular voice as particularly religious, almost fanatical, imbued with Catholicism. They said he belonged to some secret and powerful Catholic organization, perhaps Opus Dei, perhaps another whose name was never known. They added that in Mignini's particular worldview, being a prosecutor was not much a service to the state as a mission against evil, especially manifested through sex. But on the internet, Giuliano Mignini left two traces that confirm these suspicions. His name appears on two Catholic websites, one integralist, the other one, by the admission of its leaders, even reactionary enough to fight for the return of the pontifical state, as it was before the unity of Italy, defined as the work of the devil. This is how the PM has been described. Meanwhile, Amanda is in shock. Raffaele is also outside the property, shocked. The two try to comfort each other. Sollecito then gave Amanda three little kisses. The scene is captured by a cameraman, and it will soon become very popular and in the mind of the public, scandalous picture. Another scandal photo, another another scandal photo will be those in which other scandal photos will be those in which the two hold hands. The head of homicide, Napoleoni, notices that Raphael and Amanda stay away from the other witnesses and, entering Meredith's room, immediately notices the blanket covering her, exclaim, ex- exclaiming loudly, "Covering the victims? It's what women do after a murder." The house will soon fill with people who will try to understand what happened to Meredith Kercher. People who, incredibly, almost stopped looking at the crime scene to focus on those two particular guys out there. Two guys who will soon be noticed by all Perugia, Italy, and even the world. Thank you for listening to What the Crime. If you liked the episode, please leave us a review on Spotify.